You may have heard about this big class action lawsuit that was just decided against some of the biggest names in American real estate, the National Association of Realtors, Keller Williams, and you were wondering, what's this all about? Well, let me tell you. I'm not going to get into super granular detail, but the case was essentially about ending what's called cooperative compensation, which is a practice that's been going on in the real estate industry for almost 100 years. Let me tell you how cooperative compensation works now and what could potentially happen as a result of this ruling. What is cooperative compensation? When a listing agent signs an agreement to sell a house, the seller agrees to pay a certain percentage of that sale as a commission. Cooperative compensation means that the seller's broker agrees to share part of that commission with the buyer's broker. The seller's broker is essentially compensating the buyer's broker for bringing a good buyer. And of course, the buyer is the magic ingredient. Without a buyer, you don't have a sale. So cooperative compensation is the process of a total commission being paid by the seller and that commission being split between the selling broker and the buying broker. This is how it's been done for almost a century, but the lawsuit was arguing that cooperative compensation is anti-competitive and should be banned. They were saying that it was essentially a form of price fixing. Now, in Atlanta, a typical commission paid by a seller in an active market would be about 6%. And it doesn't have to be split 50-50 with the buyer's broker. A lot of that depends on the condition of the house, the quality of the neighborhood, and how quickly you expect the house to sell. How many potential buyers are you going to have for this house? If the house is a disaster, very few people are going to want it, so you might want to offer a higher level of compensation to the buyer's agent. Conversely, if the house is in great shape and is in a nice neighborhood, probably going to have a lot more potential buyers, and therefore you could offer a lower total buyer's compensation. All of this is publicly disclosed in the buyer's agent fee, which you'll see listed on any MLS listing or any website like Zillow or Redfin that aggregates MLS listings. So a typical Atlanta commission would mean a 6% total commission split evenly between the selling broker and the buying broker. Notice I said typical, not standard, not mandatory, not carved into stone. It's typical. Some agents charge more, some agents charge less. If you've been around the business long enough, some of the older agents will tell you they regularly used to get a 7% commission. Of course, the houses were a lot less expensive back then. Now, some super listing agents still ask for 7% and they get it. Some younger agents that are trying to be more competitive might ask for 5%. None of this is set in stone, and there's also nothing that says that the total commission has to be split evenly between the seller and the buyer broker. Sometimes the buying broker actually gets more than the selling broker. Why? Well, it depends on circumstances. Is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? Is the house in great shape? Is it a disaster? Does it have a really steep downhill driveway? All of these factors go into this. I regularly see buyer's compensation listed anywhere from 2% to 3% and everything in between. So again, there is no standard commission for realtors. It's all up to negotiations. Every commission is negotiable and every agent sets their own rates. And every seller can meet with as many agents as they want until they find a commission structure that's comfortable for them. I'm not sure how this constitutes price fixing. What the ruling has the potential to do is essentially void the concept of cooperative compensation and make it so that the seller and the seller's agent can no longer compensate the buyer's agent and the buyer's brokerage with part of the agreed upon commission. For most buyers, this means they would end up paying for the services of a buyer's agent out of pocket. This is one potential outcome, and I think it would be disastrous for both sellers and buyers. Let me tell you why. For sellers and their agents, if they can't compensate a buyer's agents, who's going to screen the buyer clients? Not every buyer is ready to buy a house or is qualified to buy a house right now. As someone who works primarily with buyers, one of the things I do is start the conversation about finances, go ahead and get them in touch with a qualified mortgage person and make sure that they're ready to move forward on the purchase of a house if they find a house they want. And we do all that before we go shopping, because obviously you don't want to be out looking for houses with somebody that's not prepared to buy. And once we decide to make an offer, I'm the one that puts all the paperwork together. Is the selling agent going to have to write offers on their own listing? Now imagine a listing agent is having to field calls from people who want to see her listing. How is she going to screen and schedule all of these people? Well, she'd probably have to hire an assistant who would want to be compensated, and therefore she'd have to charge a higher commission. Or you could put the onus on the seller, ask them to field the calls, be there when the buyers show up on Monday, Tuesday, Saturday, Sunday, whenever. And again, you don't really know who these people are. By having a licensed buyer's agent, you're creating a layer of insulation between a home seller and a potential home buyer. So you're getting a level of pre-screening that takes place before anyone walks into your home. Add to that, there's a big conflict of interest if an agent is listing a home and also trying to represent a potential buyer for that home. That's what's called dual agency, and it's a big ethical minefield, and frankly, most brokerages will not allow it. The other strange thing about this lawsuit is that there are plenty of existing discount brokerages that will, for example, list your home on the MLS for a flat fee, but they offer no guidance in showings, negotiations. They're not going to help you find a real estate attorney to close the transaction. They take a flat fee, they list it on the MLS, and they're done with it. So as a seller, you get your house listed on the MLS with a discount brokerage. You're expected to do everything. You need to field all the phone calls. You need to schedule all of the showings. You're going to engage in your own direct negotiations with the buyer. Then you're going to need to pay a real estate attorney to write up an offer, get everybody signed on it, and then start the process of getting it closed. On the buyer side, there are licensed buyer's agents who simply open the door for you. They don't offer you any advice on the house. They can't offer you any advice on negotiations. They're simply people that have a license. They unlock the door for you, and you have to do the rest. You can save $1 that way, but you're not getting any value from it. I look at all my years of home renovation experience as a big plus that creates a lot of value for my clients. I can walk my buyers through a house before they've even made an offer, show them, the mechanicals, all of the systems, discuss the condition, the value of the house, really give them a good idea of where they stand before we even write up an offer. What's interesting is how few people choose to use these discount brokerages. It all goes back to getting what you pay for. Sure, you might save $1 here and there, but you're going to end up paying for it in time and in stress. If people didn't value what realtors bring to the table, these discount brokerages and buy owner services would be growing year after year after year, but that's not what we're seeing. The reason they aren't growing is they don't provide any advice, they don't provide any service, and they don't provide any value. A little while back, there was a man in North Decatur who listed his house by owner. It was a nice house. It's actually well priced, in great condition, and pretty good location. I stopped by there and offered to list the house for him for 2%, and he declined. He wanted to keep it by owner. He wanted to, save some money so he could retire to North Georgia. What ended up happening was the house sat on the market for well over a year. He finally did list with a traditional brokerage, finally got it sold, but for far less than he would have a year ago. Plus the interest rates had gone up, so that dinged him on the price. And the cost for that, he wanted to save some money, but what ended up happening was it cost him a year of his life. He could have already been up retired in the mountains where he wanted to be, and he's sitting here trying to get this house sold. So in this case, the value a good agent brought to the table was literally a year of his life. And for buyers, also consider that, we're in a market unlike any other. Prices have skyrocketed. Houses are in very limited supply. Interest rates are at a 28-year high. It's a very bad situation for buyers, and all of a sudden they're looking at having to come out of pocket if they want to have professional representation in their real estate search. Cooperative compensation has been the practice in real estate for almost 100 years now because, frankly, it works. Whether they're buyers or sellers, it creates the right incentive for people to do the right thing. And it encourages a healthy, robust, and competitive real estate market. One other thing to note is that the jury that decided this case heard 11 days of testimony, yet returned a verdict in 2.5 hours. Now, I've sat on at least 3 juries in my life. These were all one-day trials, and I can't remember ever coming back with a verdict in 2.5 hours on matters that are obviously far less complicated than real estate compensation on a national level. So as always, if you're thinking of making the move to Atlanta, please feel free to reach out. My contact information is in the box below. I'd love to talk to you, help you plan your move or investment in Atlanta. Thanks for watching.